All right, guys. So we have another fun one here. I have Ashby Miller. He runs a big YouTube channel. I've been watching his stuff for quite some time. He knows quite a bit about OA. We've been talking bees here for a little bit. So I just have some general questions for him. We're going to run it down just like the Ian video. The goal with this is to educate you all and myself as to how other beekeeping operations use oxalic acid in their mite treatment program and how they, essentially use our devices and some of the tips and tricks that they know that I may not, and in me learning, educating you all. So that's kind of our piece. So why don't you start off for those who don't know you, your operation, who you are, a little bit of stuff about you. We'll take it from there.
Did you say OA? Are we supposed to use oxalic acid?
Are we? It's the legal OA.
There you go. Hey guys, I'm Ashby Miller, run Ashby Farms in Burlington, North Carolina. We're Central Piedmont. My wife Corey and I, we run about 500 colonies. We're still trying to grow it a bit bigger to what size we will see, but we've been very blessed to have lots of people help us along the way. And we started a YouTube channel with the idea of helping people kind of either grow from 2 to 10 hives or from 10 to a sideline or whatever that looks like, maybe 50 to 200 hives. I've appreciated people like Ian Stepler along the way to help me grow and just that content. So I try and gear my content towards that group of folks. It's pretty nuts and bolts. It's straightforward to the point. Kind of show what we do day to day.
That's awesome. So, all right, I'm just going to walk down my bullet point list and we'll kind of take it from there. So the next thing is just to explain your mite treatment program. As you and I know, mites are not a one-hit kill throughout the year, and you don't have to think about them anymore. So what tools do you use? All not just OA, anything you use throughout your regimen. I know you kind of run off of a calendar basis, but like, what's that look like?
So I'll tell you what we did in the past. I'll tell you our plans for the future. 2 years ago, we were heavily using APA-VAR strips, and then I didn't see any issues at that point in time, but the cost is just getting on up there. So this past season, I did a video about using oxalic acid. We did our first treatment on December 4th, and it was almost, it got really warm in December, and we went in around Christmas because I had some time off, and we checked on them, and there was like 4 and 5 frames of brood. I mean, it was nuts. And so the benefit of that was it really repopulated the colonies midwinter. And then we had a cold January for almost 3 straight weeks, and the queens just quit laying altogether. So we had a second solid opportunity, and we hit them again January 26th. So last year, let's see, it got down to like 5 degrees between the week of Christmas and New Year's, and so we hit them January 4th and January 14th. This season recently was OA the week between Christmas and New Year's, just before the Nobby. And for those of you who don't know, that's the National Honeybee Expo in Louisville. And then we hit them the week after we came back from Nobby for a second go round. It's been kind of a mild winter here this year. It's interesting in proximity to me. So we're right smack dab in the middle of North Carolina. There's a couple of people whose opinions I really trust. And so, we all talk. And 2 hours west of me, there's a guy I really respect his opinion. His name's Patrick McNeely, and he's out of Statesville. And so at that point, in the winter, we're doing spot checks, 30 seconds in and out of the hive, looking for brood, looking for that time they're going broodless. We're just trying to time it right. So Patrick's best week this year, was the week of Thanksgiving, whereas we still had, we're 2 hours. We're not okay. I'm sorry, like an hour 40 east of him, and we had 2, 3, 4 frames of brood. So it's interesting how just that little bit of travel distance can determine if they're broodless or not. It also depends. Another friend of mine who is about 40 minutes east of me near Raleigh, he uses quilt boxes on top of all of his hives.
Oh
And
yeah.
due to the the extra warmth that comes from that. He said they hardly ever go broodless, and he's been keeping bees 8 years. He's got about 40 colonies, and I really respect his opinion too.
Wow.
So, we're just
That's pretty
looking for
neat.
that
I didn't even
window.
think about that. I didn't even think about cold boxes insulating them that much that it makes total sense. I just didn't even think about that because I've run them with and without some years. So that's pretty neat.
Yeah. It's just a matter of gathering a lot of other people's experience and opinions, and then for us, it's coming down. It's just a matter of going out and doing spot checks on a warm afternoon, and you don't want to you don't want to open the hive too long, but just a minute in and out, it's pretty good. So yeah, we talk about going forward this year. Obviously, well, for those of you who don't know at home, we've been working implementing UBO. We were part of a handful of folks in the U.S. that participated last year. We got some really positive data, and the nice thing about UBO, that's unhealthy brood odor, it's the first opportunity we have to use data-driven results to determine how hygienic the bees are in relation to Varroa. Whereas like a freeze kill brood assay determines how hygienic the bees are, but not specific to Varroa. A Harbo assay must be done on untreated hives. They are painstakingly long to do, but and also there's some human error that could occur depending on how good your eyesight is and the light you have available, because you're literally looking for mites. So if you miss them, it could skew your numbers there. UBO it really expedites testing a large sample size to identify who are the highest scoring VSH breeders. And then our issue last year, we had 7 high scoring breeders. It's just not enough to continue the genetic variability, the genetic diversity. So myself and altogether, there's 6 of us in the Central Piedmont, North Carolina. We started a co-op that we will trade virgins with each other at no cost. And the thought there is that we have access to each other's genetic or high scoring UBO genetics, so that we can. It's kind of like this. If VSH is in people would be like somebody with red hair and blue eyes, it's double recessive. So this gives us the opportunity to have access to about 30 different breeder queens who all share that same trait. And then what we would expect is, if you continue to breed, we'll see that trait expression show more and more in the subsequent generations. So the data is very early at this point, but we're gonna publish everything we got, good or bad, and year to year criteria may change. But one thing we know from the University of Georgia, that Keith Delaplane led that study, is colonies where there was at least 30 different drone semen. I'm sorry, when they dissected the queens of colonies that had low Varroa mite numbers, they found that when the queen had been bred with at least 30 different drone, or another way to say that, when there was 30 different drone semen present in the queens that they dissected, then the colonies had substantially less mites. So the idea is lots of genetic diversity should equal lower mite counts in the hive. And what we aim to do is keep that genetic diversity while the queen mothers are all high scoring VSH queens. So it'll be interesting to see what comes.
That's great. I've seen everybody talking about these UBO devices. They're fine. It looks like they're finally now like available for people to purchase and start testing. So I'm going to look into it, because the problem I've had with VSH queens and that kind of thing is, and now I'm by no means do I sell queens. I've reared queens previously, but to my knowledge, VSH queens, when transferred to somebody else's yard, only last one generation. Like they don't just go by because all the other drones from other colonies, their genetics take back over, and then it's not, they just don't seem to hold up from what I've seen. Now I could be dead wrong. You tell me I'm missed something, but so far that's kind of what I've gathered from the VSH thing.
So the target goal, right?
You know what I mean? Not at like you're building the perfect environment for them to work. Does that make sense? Like it wasn't.
Yeah. So if I were to, let's say I ship you my virgins, we know that this trait is carried via the mother, and it can be carried by the father, by the drones. But if I were to ship you, say, daughters, we would expect a percentage of those daughters I ship you to also carry that trait, and she would breed with your local drone stock. And if she exhibits that trait the following year, her drones are now flooding your area with that same high scoring VSH trait. So the at the moment, the issue is we don't have a big drone stock that is VSH. So it is easily lost within a generation or two. And that's an idea at the moment. I think that as we make progress going forward and we start to change the drone stock, whether that's at a county level or even a lot of people don't want to they don't want to set up the breeding yards and the breeding programs and stuff. So they rely on larger commercial outfits. I think in time, the customer will start to demand from the larger breeders, or at least that's my hope, that we have some better hygienic stock. And hopefully then, if we get more hygienic stock, we'll start to see mite resistance more at broad scale. At the moment, this is so new and so early. It's great to be in the oxalic acid business, is my opinion.
Yeah. It's just the whole thing's just fascinating, in all honesty. I just the bee genetics all the way through, treatment methods. I just like it all. It's all very fascinating. That's why we're having this conversation. So anyway, I'll talk more about that a little bit because I've got UBO questions I want to talk to you off air. But
okay.
For those who are watching this for OA, I'm curious if you can run through your devices, accessories, runtime in your batteries. That's kind of like the big one,
Sure.
like what you see out of yards. What made you do a purchasing decision on batteries? If that kind of realm, just a peek into like the mechanical side of why you made your assessment there.
Well, I want everybody to know at home that I am not paid for what I'm about to say. What I'm about to say is Rob has been very generous in getting me up to speed, growing a commercial outfit. And so along the way, we started with the ProVap, and we ran it off of a deep cycle battery with an inverter. And it was an earlier version that you had, and we had an issue with the heating element, and I contacted Rob, and he made it right. He just was like, hey, if you've got any mechanical sense, I can walk you through it real quick. I did the repairs myself in like 10 minutes. And I was very pleased with how Rob stood behind his product. I think the second time we burned through a heater element, because when I called Rob and said, hey, I have this issue again, Rob said, how many colonies did you treat? And I was like, 330. And he was like, hey, you said, well, it's time for you to move up. You're at that scale. And I started looking at how long, the cost with oxalic acid is not the OA vaporizer. It's not the oxalic acid itself. The cost, the expense to the beekeeper is the beekeeper's time. Whether that's your time or you're paying somebody as your labor is the expense. And so it was an easy decision. I want to say the InstantVap was like $500, somewhere around there. And
we have pricing.
Anytime we have a major expense, I always tell my wife, I say, we're going to buy once and cry once. And so we got it, and it was like 1 minute treatments. It was lightning fast compared to the 110. And so I went with the Milwaukee brand because my employer is generous enough to let me borrow our Milwaukee batteries from work. Well, to jump into battery and battery life, so this year, a neighbor, a good friend of mine, he has a lot of Milwaukee tools as well. So I've dealt with 4 different size batteries. They're all the M18 batteries by Milwaukee, dealing with the InstantVap. And I've used the 4.0 XC, the 5.0, and then the 8.0 and the 12.0 batteries. And so customers are probably wondering how much can you get out of each battery. So on it takes almost a full amp hour just to get the unit to come up to temperature. And so when you're talking about the 4.0s, and these are older batteries, like work needs to replace them, but they're not spending money right now. So I'm lucky if I can get 8 or 9 hives out of the 4.0s. Our 5.0 battery is new at work, so I can get about 16 colonies out of that. I borrowed the 8.0 and the 12.0 from my.
What are you shooting there, dosage wise?
We shoot 4 grams on everything.
Okay.
Everything's either a single or double. We shoot a 4-gram dose flat out. I think they say you can shoot 4 grams per box, so a double deep would technically need 8 grams, but we're just shooting them. My idea is it's like fertilizing tomatoes. You're better to give miniature doses more often than you are a large punch at one time.
I agree tremendously, and I actually have some testing coming up that I want to run by you just to get your take, but I agree with that tremendously. I don't think it's more. I think it's more frequent, I think, is the piece. But anyway, go ahead.
We had a small produce farm. We did about 2,000 tomato plants, so I understand tomatoes. And yeah, so tomatoes do better with more doses weekly than they do like a big punch every 30 days. And I feel like OA is the same way. So we use a 4-gram dose. And back to battery size. So the 8.0 batteries, we could get about 24 to 26 colonies. And then with the 12.0s, I got 37 colonies. So to me, like, the bigger battery is going to be a better investment. They're going to take longer to recharge. They are more expensive, but they'll last a bit longer, and they're going to last longer. I run 40 colonies to a yard, so it's nice that we can get almost a full yard on one battery.
Sure.
Yeah. And then this year, as I said, I'm going to buy a second InstantVap because again, time is my most costly thing. It's the thing I can't make more of. I can do everything else better, faster here and there, but we can't make more time. So for me, having a second vape, there's no way I could run 3 vapes, but I can run 2 by myself.
Yeah.
And it makes just plugging through. I doubt we will make this. We're going to take a stab at making 1,000 colonies, getting to 1,000 colonies this year.
Wow, that's awesome. Dude,
that's awesome. No.
Cool.
Yeah, we need to sell quite a bit of nukes to recoup some of our investment at this point. So it's really going to depend on how sales go as to how many colonies we retain. So people always ask me, how many colonies do you have? I say, well, right now we got 500. We're going to attempt to make 1,500. Let's say we get 70% of that. That's about 950 colonies or queens that are going to make it home. Out of that 950, say we're going to sell, let's just call it 450, and that leaves us with 500 on top of the 500 we've got. We're at 1,000. So
there you go.
And then you've got die off and absconding, and one place we really took a beating last year was in August. I decided to use Apiguard, which is thymol. And I watched my colonies. We took 10%. loss in August. We have 95, 96-degree days. I'm giving them a half a dose, 25 grams. And still it's blowing them out of the colonies. You open them up 3 treatments later and the colonies are down 60, 70% in numbers. It was just too much. So this year I'm going to try and hit with OA the 12 months, just a once a month while you're out there in the yard. I don't know if that's the right decision or the wrong decision. I don't have any evidence to support this, but again, my thoughts, and we discussed this at the beginning, and I'm encouraging people this at home. I don't want oxalic acid in my honey. I know it's approved, but personal choice, I don't want it. But let's say we pull honey in June, basically June to March. We're going to give them a once a month. So let's do some quick math at home. For round numbers, if you had 600 colonies and it's a minute per treatment, then that's 600 minutes, which is 10 hours. 10 hours once a month times 8 months is 80 hours. And let's look at what that would save us. So let's take an average run-of-the-mill colony, and they're kind of hygienic. Maybe their UBO score is somewhere around 50. That colony is probably managing mites just fine by itself all year. And if I come along and we've got, say, 30% of the mites on their phoretic mites, they're on the outside of the bees, they're not under the cappings, and we're able to kill 20, 30% every month, that helps that colony keep the mite levels in check. And it's not the mites that kill bees, it's the viruses associated. What does that cost us? That costs us 80 hours to do that. What kind of yields do we get back with that? Well, let's say we're able to save 10% of our colonies that we would have already lost. 10% of, let's say, 500 is 50 colonies. 50 colonies next year will generate maybe in the range of $40,000. Let's say I'm half wrong. Let's say $20,000. Let's just say you take 2 nooks off of each one. That's 20 grand off 50 colonies. So
Sure.
Would you spend 80 hours this year to save 20 grand next year? To me, that's a no-brainer.
Makes a lot of sense.
And as quick as the OA is to do, it's like OA is not a fix-all. OA is highly effective when the colonies are broodless. But to me, it's like, well, what happens if we spend 80 hours work and it's all for naught? Then it's something we tried. Beekeepers, we experiment, but at least we know that we're trying something. We're trying to breed a hygienic bee, and I can't sell hygienic bees until I fix my own house, until I fix my own operation. So I have to keep my mites in check in my own outfit first. And one of the tools we're going to use is oxalic acid regularly. I think there's something to that. It makes sense. I haven't heard anybody say to the other. I actually don't take credit for this idea. A good friend of mine is Phil Haynes with Ape and Bees out of Whispering Pines, and big shout out Phil, because Phil has some crazy thoughts, and we talk all the time, and I'm like, well, that makes sense to me. That I can't say that's wrong. And he's been advocating for me, hey, look, you need to, if you're in the bee yard once a month, hit them with OA all year long. And between that and more hygienic bees, it's gonna have less loss for us through the year, which is more money next year generated for our business.
Sure. And that's awesome. And that's really the bottom line is, for the guys who aren't just at a hobby level, it's got to financially make sense at some point, so trying new things is definitely how you make things make sense. I'm dead set on running an experiment that we'll have on the YouTube channel. Hopefully this year. I was talking to the videographer about it today. I want to do a every other day treatment regimen, but like overly documented, down to like taking pictures of brood pattern before and after, and then a few months after to see what changes. But I've been looking, so like everybody's trying to, figure out, just like yourself, trying to figure out these patterns. So one of my thought processes is, well, if bees are, if the worker bees, now granted drones take longer, obviously, but we're talking worker bees, it's about a 10-day pupa period. So you may figure maybe 11 or 12, they're really under cappings, right? When it's all said and done. So
Right.
you're like, all right, well, I've personally seen on bottom boards I pull out, heavy mite drop 24 and 48 hours on those bottom boards post treatment. Then 36 hours, it's kind of nothing on the board. You know, I'll see a few, but not
Right.
like I did on day two post drop. Now, granted, I know that's not a wash. I know, you know, and it could be residual, and that's fine. But if it is residual and it's killing mites throughout the day on day two, in theory, then treating on the second day would essentially just blanket all the ones that are emerging, and they basically get a good coat before that cell gets reclosed in theory.
Right.
So it would kind of, and I don't think that it's, oh, treat them with, you know, 4 grams of Boxer in this window. I think, and the testing will essentially be as far as right now. I don't have anything set in stone, but I think I'm going to try and do the legal, in all honesty, because I want to see if doing a smaller dose at a higher frequency is the ticket. So I've got this weird theory that as people, you know, do this 4-day increment and they just increase the level of OA, you know, like 4 grams or 6 grams or what have you, whatever their colony
Yeah.
is calling. I think what it does is it's like half-life or whatever lingers longer in the colony. So I've got this hunch that like they're, instead of having a mite drop up to 24 hours, they're having one to like 3 days. So then they're treating on day 4. So there's really not a big overlap here, right? There's not a big
Right.
hole
Right.
where it could have. So the only way that holes get blown on this is 2 ways. Is if the mites really don't go back in the cells immediately, then it really doesn't matter, right? So like there's always that
Right.
potential. But in my head, I'm like the male, sorry, the mated mite, or however that works out,
Right.
could in theory just go back and make another one. I could mess that completely up, but that's my notion of what this is going on, is the potential.
Well,
So
it
I could be dead wrong on that though.
two things on this. I'm going to tell you my understanding. I'm no expert on mites, and forgive me if this is wrong to the internet. But my understanding is that the male mite is on top of the pupae, up towards the head, and the foundress will be at the bottom of the cavity. And Randy Oliver has shown that the uncap recap behavior of hygienic bees, when we VSH bees, is if you have a control where there's no hygienics at all, and they're left to their own devices, mite loads explode. What we learn is that for every one mite that goes in the cell, 1.4 mites comes out. And so with that life cycle being about 11 days that the pupae is capped, then, you know, the next time 1.4 mites goes in and maybe 1.9 mites comes out. And then 1.9 mites goes in and 2.5 mites goes in. And it's exponential very quickly through July into August.
Right.
So what Randy Oliver documented was that in the uncap recap behavior, and again, forgive me on this study, but around day 5, day 6, I think it is, if the bees will uncap to check, let's say that the pupae emits a pheromone and says, "Hey, colony, we are stressed. We're emitting a stress pheromone," and you have hygienic bees. The bees go and uncap to check on the pupae. If it's too bad, they'll pull the pupae completely out of the colony, out the front porch. If there's an issue with, we're just going to uncap it, and the male mite, which is sitting right below the capping, goes ahead and walks out, then there's not enough time, nor is there a male to breed with the female foundress. And so when they recap the cell, then it's an unbred female, even if she's a fertile female. Sometimes you have infertile females and fertile females, but there's simply not enough life cycle left. And so when with the uncap recap behavior, one mite goes in and 0.7 mite comes out. So we quickly see a decline in the mite population due to the expression of the VSH behavior that we now know as uncap recap. To touch base to what you were saying, and again, don't shoot me. I try and soak up a lot of knowledge, but I'm not the best at regurgitating. Bob Benny spoke that Jennifer Berry out of University of Georgia has already done this 2-day test, and they looked at, let's say, it's late July, early August, and in your mite load, your graph is just going up, and then it's really getting steep. And so they said, how many every other day treatments of OA would it take to not make it curve, but to bring it from here flat? And it was 9 treatments, 9 every other day treatments. So for a backyard hobbyist, that's applicable and very doable to just flatten the line. But for somebody at my scale, it's not practical at all.
I wonder why it was 9 though. 9 just doesn't make sense mathematically. Like, unless there's just not a kill on day 2. Like if everything's killed on impact, and then it just takes them 48 hours to groom them all off the bees, like that's the only way in my head that makes sense.
Well, so I agree with you, and I would reach out to Bob and see if he can put you in contact with Jennifer. And again, I say start with Bob because it may not have been Jennifer. I don't want to quote studies. Again, I can't remember everything I read, but
they can do and see if I can't come across some literature on it.
If anything else, perhaps it shows you towards a study, and then they can tell you, all right, we used 1 gram or 2 grams or 4 grams of OA, and it's a starting point for somebody's already done some research, and maybe it helps you not repeat that research. And that's just my thought.
Yeah. No, that's very interesting. I'm going to do some digging now, because I'm just curious why it took so many rounds to see a reduction. I don't know, but a lot of those studies, a lot of the OA studies so far, there's a lot of variables that don't get talked about. Humidity, all these extra things that just aren't calculated and observed. So I think that there's some gray area in some of the studies. There's some people who've made claims that OA is weak, and I'm like, yeah, but you forgot to say you're treating during summertime. Like, I'll tell you, it's not strong when there's a lot of cat brood. You know what I mean? Like, there's realities here. I find it fascinating. I just find the whole thing fascinating, and the beekeeper in me likes experimenting, as you said. That's the fun thing.
Here's what I've been telling people. Every private and public dollar for 30 years has failed. If what we're doing right now works, it'll be fantastic for the beekeeping community as a whole. If what we do continues to follow the statistic and fail, we can go right back to using chemical treatments just like we are today. The point is we are all, anybody trying to do something towards Varroa is still in the Wild Wild West. This is, we know that OA is very effective when they're broodless, but what if you're on a pollination circuit and they never go broodless?
Right.
Which hobbyists, I'll admit, I didn't understand this. It's staggering the percentage of there's only 300 or 400 commercial beekeepers, but those 300 or 400 probably have upwards of 50% of the total colonies in the U.S. A handful of people control half the hives, and they are on 18-wheelers, and they move, and they never grow broodless. And to me, I look at this and go, okay, well, then those are the people who are demanding it most. They can afford it most. And whoever can solve this issue will make a humongous difference for the beekeeping community. We'll see. Time will tell. That's at this point, if you want to be a citizen scientist at home, what's funny is my dad has a master's my dad has a master's in botany and has been a wealth of knowledge for me. I'm a mechanic by trade. I didn't know a lot past high school biology. I've been blessed where I work that there's a beekeeper there, and he keeps about a dozen colonies, and he has a microbiology degree. I know 4 or 5 other folks in the realm. Phoebe Snyder with Optera, biology degree, Corey Stevens, same thing. And where I'm going with this is, I have been blessed to be able to ask so many people in my circles, do you think this idea would work? And they'll say, well, I don't think that will work, or I do think that will work. Or, a lot of the biology that we see in bees is not far off from plants, which is my dad's realm, or Phil Haynes he comes from England, and he was very big into sheep, and the sheep and pig industry genetics are very similar to bee breeding genetics. So it's nice to the biology is 16 chromosomes from each side. The allele, there's a lot that's similar. So I've been blessed to be able to bounce these ideas and have these people go, no, that doesn't work, or you might want to ask somebody else, or yes, that'll absolutely work. Or some of that's yes, that'll work in theory. And all we can do is say, my money's where my mouth is. We're trying. Until then, oxalic acid's our answer.
Right.
Period. With where we live in the South, it's too hot to use formic in August. It'll cook them. I learned it's too hot to use thymol. Cooked them. Apivar, the jury's out. There's some folks saying it's losing its efficacy. I'm not going to sit here and say it is or it is not. It's staggeringly it's expensive. It's almost cost prohibitive for me. And if the customers continue to have issues with mites showing up in mite washes after using Apivar, they won't be on the market. The customer won't demand it anymore.
Right.
Mother Nature will take its course. So you look at what options do we have. If I can't use formic or thymol at that time of year, oxalic acid pads look promising, but the jury's still out. They're unapproved.
Yeah.
A lot of the commercial guys, they have to turn to off-label stuff. They can't tell anybody about what they're doing, but their livelihood is at stake. I can't blame them, but if it's not approved, you're kind of out there in the real Wild Wild West. So again, the only safe, effective thing is OA, and I'm a cheerleader for Lorob Bees because I went from like 3-4 minutes per treatment with the ProVap to like a minute per treatment on the InstantVap. And again, my thing, I don't have more of his time. My kids are growing. One left for out of state today, and they're growing up on us. So I want to spend as much time as I can, and a lot of times that's saving time out in the bee yard.
That's awesome. And my last one was just any tips or tricks, but you've gone over a ton of tips or tricks, tips and tricks so far. So unless you have anything that you'd like to reference, Bob, I think I'm going to wrap us up. I've held enough of your time.
That sounds good. If you want to follow my content, it's Ashby Farms NC on Facebook and YouTube. And I just tell people, I've been so blessed to have so many people help me. If there's ever a way I can help you, let me know. Oftentimes that just involves me sending you a video link. I speak a lot at our local clubs, and I tell people, if you're not watching Bob Benny, you're at an educational disadvantage. I'm a big fan of Bob. I wouldn't be where I am today without his content, and I'm just thankful to everybody that's helped me along my journey.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And yeah, we'll kind of wrap it out there. Thank you for your time. This has meant a lot to me. I mean a lot to a lot of people watching, so I do appreciate that. And I'll
thank you.